It's the first time I've ever owned my own Pro Street car, and it is the worst hood scoop in the history of this show.
I know, but you've been looking for a Pro Street car for ages.
A long time, and finally, this one was perfect. And on this episode, we're gonna have to throw an engine, transmission, drive shaft, headers, exhaust, everything on this thing and make it run and drive. It's really gonna be street strip. It's not gonna be a full-on dedicated drag car. It's gonna be something that I can cruise around. Later on, I do want to change the thing up. I would like to make it a full-on street cruiser. I'd like to make it a really hardcore drag car, but for this episode, it's gonna be a tweener, but with an engine that's pretty absurd.
One thing you may not realize, Freiberger,
Yeah?
is you actually picked up one of my favorite things.
What?
A Nova drag car.
Really?
Yes.
I had no idea. Is it because it's a Chevy Duster?
Well, basically, I mean, look at it. It's really cool. This is the style of Nova that I really like. So,
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, all we need is the right engine and it'll just be over the top.
I think I need to explain to the audience, though, what does Pro Street even mean? Have you noticed how, like, the kids these days don't understand?
How could you not know what Pro Street is?
I don't know. I see people all the time. If it's a drag car, they go, oh, it's Pro Street. It's not. I'll explain why. I'm also going to tell you exactly why I bought this particular car. And then I think we can reveal the engine we're going to be installing.
Can I give them a little hint?
What?
You might have seen it before.
Ooh, he's right. This is my brand new, to me, 1969 Chevy Nova, and it's really everything that I was looking for in a Pro Street car. But what is Pro Street? It began in about 1969 when drag racers figured out that instead of cutting big holes in their quarter panels to fit giant drag racing slicks, they could instead do that thing with tubbing it and moving the tires up under a factory quarter panel. In 1970, the NHRA introduced a class called Pro Stock that was an extension of stock class cars at the time, and all of those things were tubbed. And that was inspiration for guys to do the same thing for street cars. And in the late 80s, you started seeing some tubbed cars on the street, especially guys building cars just like a NHRA Pro Stock race car, but running it on the street. And later, in the very late 70s, early 80s, it became a show car trend. Now, there's two kinds of Pro Street cars, one of which is called a back half. Basically, it's a tube chassis from the firewall back for the huge tires. And then there's also what's called a full tube chassis car, which is fabricated frame from the front all the way to the back. The reason I got this particular car is that it is built very much like those early 90s drag racing Pro Street cars. That means it's a back half. The front suspension is stock concept. It actually has a full Martz chassis front suspension, which is all tubular. That wouldn't have existed in the 90s. The back half has got a 4-link in it and a Ford 9-inch, and of course, giant tubs for those tires, which are a 14.5 32. The other thing that was really critical for me is that it's drag strip legal. This thing is NHRA safety teched up to an ET of 8.5 seconds in the quarter mile. It has a full roll cage, and as you'll see, seats, harnesses, all that stuff. And that was also really important to me. Now I'm gonna show you the engine we're gonna install in this thing. Ha ha! This is the tunnel cram motor. It's a 555 cubic inch big block Chevy, and it runs from 1,000 to 1,500 horsepower. Let me tell you the entire story of this thing from top to bottom. The greatness begins with two Holley Dominator XP series carburetors. They're 1,050 CFM each. The supercharger is an 871 from the blower shop, and it has all their trick guts in the thing. It's fantastic. Now, the thing that makes this different than most supercharged engines is the tunnel cram part of it. The supercharger is bolted on top of a Profiler tunnel ram. The cylinder heads on this are AFR's 357cc inlet runner units. Now, the compression on it is only 8.3 to 1. This was built a long time ago when you would run really low compression for boost. The displacement's 555 cubic inches. That's a 4.56-inch bore and a 4.25-inch stroke. The camshaft is a big old Hankin solid roller. The duration at 50 thousandths tappet lift is 281, 290. The lift, 800 on the intake, 782 on the exhaust, and 114-degree lobe separation angle. Now, the reasons that I'm bonded to this thing are like multifold. First of all, the whole long block, cam and everything is the exact same engine that I ran at the Bonneville Salt Flats with a 1471 supercharger on it. It made about 1,300 horsepower, and I went 251 miles an hour and set a record at the Bonneville Salt Flats with that combination. And honestly, I haven't even freshened the motor up since then. Right now, it's making 8 pounds of boost on gasoline, and it makes 869 pound-feet of torque at 4,700 RPM, and it makes 1,000 plus horsepower at 6,700 RPM. So I'm super stoked on this, but I'm gonna have to talk to Dulcich and figure out where we begin to start assembling this thing into my 69 Nova.
Well, I've never even looked under the hood. Let's get rid of this. You're not gonna use it anyway.
Oh, I hope it never goes on the car again.
It won't.
I told everybody all about the tunnel cram.
I know.
I'm stoked on it.
I like the tunnel cram.
It's gonna make this car kind of like both a street strip car and a ridiculous fairground cruiser all at the same time.
Well, I had to convince you on the tunnel cram.
You did. I couldn't get another hood in time for the episode, though.
We don't need a hood. We've got a gigantic motor.
The guy I got this from had a small block in it. He pulled the engine and trans out and left everything else. It's got radiator, wiring, fuel system, drive shaft for a Turbo 400.
It's my first look, and it actually looks pretty good. You know what else I like?
What?
This bulkhead fitting here puts the coil inside the car. Yeah.
This is a Martz subframe. It bolts into the stock location. I hope it's much lighter. It's got rack and pinion steering and coilovers.
It looks a lot lighter.
Yeah.
Actually, that center thing's pretty thick. It's like 1/4 inch thick.
Here's another old friend. It's the Gearstar Turbo 400 automatic transmission, originally built for the Clevo Commando. You remember that project? It was my Jeep Commando. I think it was a 72. And we started to put a 650 horsepower Ford Cleveland engine in it. And so Gearstar built this full manual valve body Turbo 400 for that thing. Sadly, yes, I gave up on the Clevo Commando. It's gone. This has been sitting in my garage ever since then. It has a bell housing on it right here that is designed to convert it for the Cleveland. I ended up getting an Ultra Bell here. This is the cool thing these days is you can buy these automatic transmission bell housings and adapt your Turbo 400 or Power Glide or C4 or whatever to almost any engine up front. You can get them for Toyota 2JZ, small block Chevy, I mean, everything. I need to rip this one off and install this one. The way they work is that they are bolted on to the bolts around the front pump in the transmission, and you do have to cut the stock bell housing off or mill it off, as it looks like Gearstar did. And all that work's been done for me, so I just have to do an R&R here. Okay, that's on. All right, that's all we need. We need to get this off, right? My torque converter isn't here yet, but I'm gonna install the flywheel anyway because we need to move forward even if we have to back up later. My concern being that the holes in this flex plate might not be big enough for the holes in the torque converter. Could be 3/8 versus 7/16. This is an SFI approved flex plate, and it is required for the drag strip. And here's a tech tip. When you grease them, you cannot also use Loctite. The Loctite basically won't serve its purpose and will just turn into goo in there for absolutely no reason. Wow, this thing's heavy. Normally, I would take off the supercharger and have much shorter chains and much lower lift height, but Steve says this will work. Yikes, this is scary. This is worse than an Ironhead Hemi.
Is it?
What is the deal? All right, is this gonna go?
Oh, yeah.
It needs to go higher, doesn't it?
You're going crooked.
I just want to get it someplace where we can lower it again.
Yeah, I know, but you got to pull this around. Here, let me drive the car.
Go ahead. Okay, now that's way off center. Okay, stop there.
Here we go.
Man, we haven't even removed the radiator from the car. This is kind of incredible. And stop. We've got the engine about halfway in because we're looking for that feeling of satisfaction when you drop the engine in for the first time. Here's the thing, you can save a lot of money buying somebody else's old race car. It's like way cheaper than building one from scratch, but you have to make a lot of stuff your own. Here's something I would have never done in a million years is mounted the line lock or the roll control right here on the roll bar at a weird angle like this that puts the lines way over here that is preventing me from getting a header in. Now maybe we can get the header in from the bottom, especially if we remove that steering shaft, but this is stupid. Straight OD stupid. Cherry picker coming out. Now we're gonna try and fit the headers up in here. And as you can see, I went full streetcar with this. These are 2¼ inch tubes with a 4-inch collector on a slip fit. And look how short they are. These are for high RPM performance. But with the blower, it'll make up for all the low-end torque that I need. Question is, will these fit with this aftermarket Martz chassis? It sure looks wide open, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. There's a lot of room there.
If it'll get past that column, it'll go, right?
We need to go higher on number 7.
What do we got going on there? Because right now
it's right on the column, isn't it?
Yeah, it's caught up on the column now.
It's caught between the column and the stud.
We've reached a huge frustration point, which is that the header that I got is not gonna fit at all. It's hitting the stock steering column, which I don't get because it's for a Nova application. But the other thing is we've got this aftermarket whole front suspension with the rack and pinion and everything, and the column is gonna have to go right through one header tube. It's beyond us being able to just move a tube, so not feeling great right now. We'll see what happens tomorrow.
One of the things I want to do is make it so when you step on the gas, this thing goes. And to get there, this throttle cable is just going to be too short to even reach the bracket up here. So I've got this one. It's way longer. That's going to take care of that problem. This thing right now is a push type linkage. I got to make it so it pulls. That's an easy deal. All I have to do is flip that arm around, and I'll have to make some kind of mounting bracket to attach the cable to this.
The header fitment is a mess, and so I called Martz Chassis this morning, who makes this subframe, and they gave me a couple part numbers of headers, and I'm getting those overnighted. I hope that those actually fit. Here's the existing fuel system in the car. First, it has a little tiny 5-gallon fuel cell. Obviously, I'm gonna need a bigger cell to drive this on the street because 5 gallons will get that supercharger 1 mile down the road. And I'm not even kidding. So I need a bigger cell. So it's got the little cell and it's got an ancient Mallory fuel pump that has the return directly in it and it goes back to the tank. So coming up here, I've only got one -10 line feeding this Holley regulator that just has 2 outlet ports. And so I think what I'm going to do with the parts that I have around is figure out how to get fuel from this car's existing fuel system into both of those carburetors. Meanwhile, Steve is over there figuring out the linkage because he's the undisputed master at throttle linkage.
What I have here is a piece of flat steel bar. I'm gonna make the bracket that fixes the blower end of the cable. Now, it may look overkill because that's 1/4 inch thick, but that takes a lot of force. So I'm gonna take this, bend it to the angles I need, and then drill a few holes, and I'll have a fabricated bracket.
I've figured out how I'm gonna plumb this fuel system, and I'm gonna do it all in braided stainless steel line and AN fittings. Let's talk about that a little bit. AN means Army, Navy, and it also means braided stainless line and some special fittings. They have special threads on them, and basically they have a little taper in here that when you stick the hose through and thread it together, it crimps the end of the hose and makes a really good high pressure connection. What I'm gonna do is take some -8 out of the regulator, gather them together, and I found a fuel log right here, and I'm gonna end up screwing it on so that I've got -8 in here and then 6 out to the carburetors. All right, here we go.
I want to give you a Roadkill Garage top tip. Now, I fabricated this bracket, and there's a hole in the end of it where the cable goes through. Now, the problem you're going to have is once you fix the end to the cable, it won't pull through the hole anymore, and you have to dismantle the other end. But if you cut a little slot in it like that, the cable goes right through, and then it's going to be taken on and off without any trouble at all, just like that. That's it. I've got all the throttle linkage stuff all done. I've got a return spring. One thing left is to test it and see if it works.
I will say when you've got it done. Ready?
Yes.
Okay, let's find out if it returns. Uh-oh, it doesn't close. It's stuck.
It was getting stuck before, but you had to do it, Freiberger. You had to do it.
Works great, Steve. Thank you for engineering that. It looks good. I finished up this half of the plumbing to take fuel to the carburetors, and I gotta say, I'm actually really proud of it. It came out great. And that's why I've got a little bit of vanity, and I'm gonna wait till tomorrow when I can come up with another red and blue fitting for the other carburetor before I put that side together. So I'm gonna start fiddling with a few other things here. And here's something that's kind of weird. We noticed there's no radiator cap on our radiator, and it is lower than the top of the engine. And when you have that situation, you've got to get the radiator cap above and the fill point above the top of the radiator. And the way I'm going to do that is with this part right here from Moroso, which is a thermostat housing with integral radiator cap fitting. And it is going to be a pain in the neck to get that cap on and off right there. It's a nuisance, but it's kind of a necessary evil in this situation. And fortunately, they make that part. I got myself an MSD Pro billet distributor. We're gonna have to tune it up just a little bit, which I'm gonna do before we find out if it's gonna fit in the engine without removing the blower. First thing we have to do is remove the steel gear off of it and put a bronze gear on because we have a billet solid roller camshaft that requires the distributor gear to be softer than the cam. So Steve, push that pin out. Knock down that pin. What was I referencing there, Steve?
That was Ronald Reagan saying, tear down that wall to Mr. Gorbachev.
All right, as you may know, the springs here determine the rate of the mechanical advance of the distributor. We're gonna get to that in a minute. But first, I'm gonna change the bushing that sets how much sweep is inside the distributor.
Where did the instructions go?
Ah, you can't do 10, Steve.
No?
18 is the smallest that they'll go. The advanced stop bushing, black, 18 degrees of swing. We need 30 total. So if it's got 18 degrees of swing, we start at 20, it's gonna go to 38. We can't have that.
The problem we have is there's too much advance even when we put the biggest limiting bushing that MSD supplies the distributor with, and you can't even custom make a bigger one because it won't fit in the machinery here. So what I'm gonna do is weld that up a little bit so that I can limit the travel with the weld, and then I can use the black bushing, which normally provides 18 degrees of mechanical advance, and I'll shoot for limiting it to about 9 degrees. That'll allow us to run 21 degrees initial for 30 degrees total.
All right, now we're ready to drop it in. I've already got the engine set at 20 degrees before top dead center. The piston's moving up on the compression stroke of the #1 cylinder. So I'm gonna be able to line up the tip of the rotor with the mark that I made on the housing that indicates the #1 cylinder on the cap. That should be the right way to go. Please go in.
Oh, that goes in no problem.
Yep. Problem is, I can't see. Might have dropped in perfectly.
Did it drop all the way?
Oh yeah, that is perfection, Steve. That went right in. All right, we're out of here. Tomorrow, headers are gonna show up. We're gonna install the transmission. We're gonna make the water pump work.
We'll fill it up with water, we'll put oil, we'll see why the valve covers are loose, and then we'll fire this thing up and drive it. Boom! We're out of here.
Let's recap what this is. It's a 555 cubic inch big block Chevy. The star of the show is, of course, the Blower Shop Supercharger. It's got 7 pounds in it right now, a pump gas tune-up. It makes more than 1,000 horsepower. I think it was 1,040 or something like that. It runs to 7,000 RPM. Transmission's a Turbo 400 with a new Yank converter, and it's a Gearstar Turbo 400. The rear end's got 513s in it. That's one of the things that's gonna hold us back today. I can only run it to half track with 513s.
Yeah, it's geared too low, but you forgot to mention, like, the key player, I mean, the name.
The tunnel cram?
The tunnel cram.
I said the star of the show is the blower, but of course, the supporting cast is the Profiler tunnel ram underneath the blower. It is pretty great.
A pretty unusual combination, a tunnel ram with the supercharger.
And it's the first time you've seen it with the scoop on it, which is, in fact, that much taller than the roof line.
It looks the part.
Yeah, tunnel cram. I drained the water out of it because it froze last night, so let's roll it over to the water box, fill it up, and then
this should be good.
Okay, second gear.
Not a lot of smoke. That is loud. Okay, so you ran a 590 at 122, first time out of the chute. I guess he was happy enough to kind of stay in it. So, man, the car looks like it's gonna work.
Wow, this thing blower surges a lot.
That was just a Sunday drive. All he did was step on the gas pedal and boogie down the track.
No drama there.
That looked like a Sunday drive, buddy.
Totally.
Yeah.
No issues. Wow, that's a bottom 9. It went 5.9 to the 8th. I basically didn't even drive the car. That was great. That's already deep in the 9s. It needs to go 570 to be in an 890 kind of range.
Yeah.
Looks like we'll get there.
I think so.
Man, that was easy enough.
Yeah, I know. Like I said, it looked like you were just taking a Sunday drive. The car works great.
Do it again?
Sure.
Okay. Come on. I'm gonna try no trans brake.
Little tricky to stage with all that lower surge. There he goes. Okay, we cut a couple of tenths from our off the trailer pass. Now, David was all over the rev limiter on the 1-2 shift. That cost a lot of time, but it ran faster than ever. That was a 5.725. Who knows? You get a good clean pass, this thing may run 550s.
Everything's okay, but I was all over the rev limiter. The tack is way, way wrong. It basically doesn't work. So that's a bummer.